Any corporation, organization, government agency that starts to look at sustainability as a strategy, this is a strategy to make impact, but also it's good governance, it's good economics, it's good for learning. If you focus on sustainability, you think about whether people are purchasing our procurement policy that was redone to reflect this work. Well, think about the money that you save by focusing on quality versus quantity, focusing on buying things that are sustainable, that are not going to be heading off into landfills. Think about the economic impact of that. This is not charity work. This is not a nice to do work. This is strategy.
This episode of Education Matters explores what it actually looks like to prepare students for a sustainable future. I believe that the time has long come that school systems need to seriously focus on sustainability and make it an integral part of everything they do, not just a slogan or one-off initiative, but as a way of thinking about leadership, learning, community, and really efficacy across the entire education system. What becomes clear in the conversation that you're about to hear is that sustainability education is no longer just about recycling programs or climate awareness posters in the hallways. Students are arriving at schools already carrying real concerns about the future, from climate anxiety to questions about how communities, economies, and technologies are shaping the world they're inheriting. And to explore all this, I'm joined by three people doing some really remarkable work in this space. Jen Stevens is the president and CEO of Learning for a Sustainable Future, a national organization working to integrate sustainability into education systems across Canada. Her work spans from research to youth engagement to professional learning and national partnerships focused on climate and sustainability education. And she is joined by two school district partners from the Halton District School Board. Rachel Irwin is the Environmental Leadership and Sustainability Manager for Halton, where she leads a system-wide effort to embed environmental and global citizenship into teaching, learning, and school culture. She's also the founder of Nature's Near, a student leadership initiative that empowers young people through outdoor learning and environmental action. And last but certainly not least is Aiman Flahat. He is Superintendent of Education with Halton, where he oversees portfolios including environmental leadership, community partnerships, and school operations. His work has helped position sustainability not as an extracurricular priority, but as a strategic and cultural commitment across the district. I think what makes this conversation especially interesting is that it moves beyond theory and what we ought to do. We talk about how sustainability becomes embedded into the actual life of a school system, how you move from isolated champions to system-wide culture change, how partnerships with Indigenous communities, municipalities, and organizations can create real momentum and change, and how giving students meaningful opportunities to act can transform anxiety into agency. We also spend some time discussing AI, innovation, and the future of learning itself. We cover how schools can help students think critically about emerging technologies while also using them creatively to solve real-world problems. And underneath all of this is the idea that education is not just preparing students for the future or the economy. In many ways, it's about helping them shape it. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Aiman Flahat, Rachel Irwin, and Jen Stevens. Good morning, Aiman, Rachel, Jen. Thanks for joining the podcast. As is typical, I would have given this whole podcast a proper introduction, but maybe we can start with introducing folks to you and to how you came together. So maybe I'll start with right to left on my screen. Aiman, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Pleasure being here. My name is Aiman Flahat, and I'm a superintendent of education with the Halton District School Board. I have a number of responsibilities, including supporting a large family of schools in our district and a number of system portfolios, including environmental and global citizenship, one of my favorite portfolios. The other portfolios I hold for our system are early years and childcare, community partnerships, and school operations. And it's a real pleasure to be here with LSF, Jen Stevens, and the team there. But one of the things that I want to point out is that we started this relationship a couple of years ago, and just starting the conversations around sustainable development goals. And we got to know the previous CEO and the director, and started having some conversations about how we can work together and collaborate. And then we brought them in, and part of my work is also community partnerships. And so we ended up signing a memorandum of understanding where we found ways to collaborate together, found ways to mutually benefit and support the organizations, and ensuring that we continue to have that same level of focus, which is really at the end of the day about driving sustainability and supporting our students. That's what we are really focused on. So it's a little bit about me and the work here.
Awesome. Let me turn it over to Rachel, your colleague, to introduce herself and her role.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Rachel Irwin, and I'm the Environmental Leadership and Sustainability Manager with the Halton District School Board. So obviously I work very closely with Aiman and his portfolio being environmental. Yeah, it's kind of everything from supporting teachers with environmental learning, but also getting to work with facilities in lots of things from school ground greening to waste reduction, reducing our carbon footprint. But then also one of the favorite parts of my job, and I get to work with Jen on a lot of this stuff too, is creating opportunities for students in our board to lead climate action. And then of course, helping Aiman with community partnerships as well in terms of community partnerships in that portfolio. So yeah, really, I guess in a nutshell, it's helping to build a culture of sustainability across Halton, which is just very exciting and a very unique role. And I'm really lucky to be in this position and working with these fabulous human beings.
Thanks for that. And last but certainly not least, Jen.
Thanks, Jason, and happy to be here and be with Aiman and Rachel. My name's Jen, and I am the president and CEO of an organization called Learning for a Sustainable Future. And we're a national organization that works to integrate sustainability into the education system. We work at all levels with school boards and districts, working to influence policy and practices, and with teachers and students as well. So I've been with the organization for about 7 years now, working on our programs, and recently stepped into this new role in September. And so grateful for all the partnerships that we have, especially Halton is an amazing one. So thanks again.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that this podcast came together through the work that my brother's been doing for years in sustainability. And he's been talking about LSF for as long as I can remember, Jen. So really happy to kind of bridge these worlds of sustainability and education. And I think a good place to start is with the big picture. And Aiman, I want to turn to you because you wrote an open letter that you shared with us that described this moment in education society as a kind of turning point. And I thought it'd be a good place to start by asking, what's kind of changed in the last few years or several years that makes sustainability something that's really at the forefront of what education systems are doing and is no longer something that is treated as optional?
Well, thanks very much, Jason. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit more about that, because I think we've seen a significant shift. And really, it's a shift from awareness to consequences. I think what's happened is that people are starting to have lived experiences with the impacts of climate change. They're seeing things firsthand, and it's undeniable in terms of what's going on and the change in the environment. And the other piece is there's a real huge shift. And I would say that organizations all over are really refocusing because they're seeing citizens, people caring. And the organizations, if they're truly purpose driven, they start to think about what it is that's important to people. If I am talking about purpose, if I am driving my organization through the vision of the organization, I want to connect to the purpose and why we do what we do and why is this important? And if I am out of touch as an organization and it's purely profit driven, well, at some point in time, places like Canada and many parts of Europe, I would say the citizens are seeing that purpose is really about humanity as well. It is not just in the idea that we need to ensure that we have a great standard of living, which we do. But how do we shift that whole narrative from focusing just on the economics to thinking about the future? And in Canada, one of the great things that has happened is the realization that we have a community here, our Indigenous community, that has been for generations now, I would say, trying to get us to refocus and to rethink about what we are doing and moving us away from the idea of ownership of the land to responsibility of the land. Like we're all, citizens here, but at the same time, people are all on a journey traveling. And so we have to think about the future, about our children, and that type of drive. And I think that kind of idea of getting students to start thinking about not only yourself, but others. And so adults have a duty and responsibility. This is not all on children to start thinking about the future and changing the future. But I think as adults, we need to find ways to develop ethical leaders, people that care, people that think of generations ahead of them, people that use what they need, but also think about when I use what I need, how am I impacting for tomorrow? And can I leave some of this for tomorrow? And so that's, I think, essentially part of the article really is that education has a really big responsibility, I believe, in education, educating our students to become leaders, ethical people that care about sustainability, care about the climate, care about health and well-being, because these are all interconnected. And of course, our Indigenous partners that have been on this land, part of our duty and responsibility is also this reconciliation of finding ways to connect with our partners, and it's got to be a true partnership, not an afterthought where we say, oh yeah, let's work with our community partners because I've already done something. But right at the beginning, before we start doing, how do we get them to connect with us and truly partner with us? So that's a little bit about that.
Yeah, and that really helps kind of set the context. So let me ask, the way you position the work in education sustainability, it's not just kind of, I think, what I was taught growing up, let's call it several decades ago, that, sustainability isn't just about environmental concerns, but about the pieces you just mentioned around leadership, economics. It does have a role to play there, and maybe most importantly, responsibility across generations. So how should educators and education systems start thinking about this differently? Because I know the work that you and Rachel are doing is quite unique in the K-12 space.
Well, I think that part of what we've been doing is finding ways to connect with educators, to connect with students, where it's not a top-down driven. So it's not us saying, you need to do this, you must do this work. Any organization that is purpose-driven, truly purpose-driven, needs to understand what is important to people in order to connect it to a purpose. And so part of our work has been developing the multi-year strategic plan in our school board. And the multi-year strategic plan, this sets out a mission, and it sets out our commitments to the whole community. So we collaborated with the entire community with staff, students, parents, community partners. And we said, what is important? Tell us what you think is important. We want to have commitments to this work and move it forward. And it was so incredibly humbling and exciting at the same time to hear that environment and global citizenship was important to people. So we decided to make that a commitment, not because we just wanted to, but this is, of course, we love the work and we want to drive this work, but it was also something that we heard from the community that this is important. Our students said, this is important. We want to learn. We want to have this as part of our commitment as a system. And so having that as a commitment in our multi-year strategic plan certainly makes our work a lot easier in order to drive this work. So it's not just an afterthought. It's not a nice thing to do. It is part of our strategy. It's part of the work that we're doing. And so thinking about that, we started to get voices. And so who are our champions out in our systems? We have 110 schools that we collaborate and work with. And we started wanting to see what ways can we work? Who are the champions at each school? And so we started off by saying, do we have a team at every school? Even if it's a team of 2 or 1, do we have a team that is passionate about this work? And so we started that and started gathering, and Rachel and I and some of our other members started to make connections with these people, reach out to the schools, identify. We got the senior team involved. Our director is very committed to this work. The chair of the board, the vice chair of the board, very connected. Our board of trustees, super inspired about this work. So when we get people excited to work with us, we found that it was much easier to drive this work through our schools. And so once we identified the champions in every school and the students that are connected to those champions, we built environmental leadership teams in every school. And by doing that, we started identifying and communicating and messaging with them, and then growing that network. We started building that network, started bringing supports into those places, started introducing them to all of our community partners, wonderful partners like LSF that we have here, to say, hey, we've got incredible organizations that can support you at your school. We have initiatives happening. We have other community partners like Burlington Green and Halton Environmental Network and various other partners. And so we started introducing them to the schools. And of course, bringing those ideas into spaces where we started gathering students together. And we have a number of other initiatives, but that's how we started doing the work and why we thought it was important.
Thanks. I think that's the envy of a lot of district leaders that I talk to that have sustainability in some shape as part of their strategic plan, but really struggle to cascade it and to measure it and to think about, what they're actually doing year over year towards those, towards those goals. Rachel, if I can ask you, a lot of schools to that point, a lot of schools teach and talk about climate change, but it often stays abstract.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what does it look like when sustainability becomes, real, true, deep learning instead of just a topic to kind of check off and cover, once a year?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to add first a bit onto what Aiman was sharing, just about how we've kind of been moving the work forward and how it started and with our multi-year strategic plan. But our students and the student voice really, I feel like, spoke out first. And with our multi-year strategic plan, we take in a lot of voices. And it was actually in 2020 that our student senate came forward and they wanted the Halton District School Board to declare a climate emergency. So our board of trustees in 2020 passed, I believe it was the first student-led climate emergency declaration in Canada that got put forward. And so in every single one of our schools, we have a plaque with our climate emergency declaration to really show this is something that, we hear you. I think there's that, a lot of our youth, me as well, is that eco-anxiety, those climate emotions. And we often talk and work a lot with LSF on, to work with that and help get rid of these eco emotions is to really do action. So going back to that purpose-driven learning where, I think we need to really dig into that outdoor experiential education or that inquiry-based learning, those community projects where, you're hitting all the subjects, but you're also giving back to your community. And it's not just focusing on it's an environmental issue. And I think students feel that weight of, the world on their shoulders, or the earth is in this huge crisis. But really, as Aiman said, and we've kind of been talking about a little bit, is really we're just trying to make sustainable citizens. And that also involves kindness, connection, community, and that's one of our other commitments. So it's not saying, the world is ending, you have to save it. How are we making them integrated in their neighborhoods? How are they giving back to their communities? How are they creating that reciprocity in those relationships? And I think we really just push that importance of relationships and community. And I think it's just those purpose-driven projects, having those teachers who are able to take their students outside, the kids get excited about something, you're really excited, and then the learning goes from there. So, right, it's just those really integrated projects, and LSF has been a great partner. I think, Jen, when was it, 3 years ago? We did our first Halton specific youth forum.
Yeah,
and that was when I really started working a lot with Jen and Sam as well. And we had, 60, 80 educators come together to do professional development. And Aiman said, those were our environmental champions we had identified. And those are often those teachers who feel alone. They're like that one champion in the school, feeling like they're doing everything they possibly can. They're running the whole eco club, constantly advocating, but they often shared that they felt alone. So a big thing for us across the system is how are we building community and how are we bringing them together, elevating their voice, listening to what they have to share and what they're experiencing in the classroom. So LSF has been so great at helping us create these events where not only do we have this awesome day for students to connect school to school and make new friends and hear what other schools are doing, but for the teachers to do the same, to get that climate education. And then not only that, but after they leave that conference, they're encouraged to take action. So LSF is really helping us do that action, purpose-driven work as well. So they leave with a grant, they can go back to school, figure out, what's an issue or something we can tackle here and give back. So it's been very nice how it's all kind of come together and fallen into place, and just the great partnerships and what comes from it. It's really exciting.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Rachel. That's actually a great segue to turn over to Jen and allow us to zoom in on the work that LSF does in partnership with the school district.
Yeah, I think both Aiman and Rachel have covered a huge, huge portion of that. And just to build off what Rachel was saying too about the importance of action and climate change, and we're really seeing that in the data that, it's imperative for students to feel like they have autonomy and can take action on issues that are important to them. And with growing eco and climate anxiety, that piece is crucial. And those opportunities not only contribute to making a positive difference when it comes to climate change, but also ownership of, their role in how they can contribute. When it comes to the partnership with Halton, I think, we're doing some other research at LSF too on whole institution approaches to sustainability. And something that we're seeing in that research is just how important support at a leadership level, at a board level is. And it's so clear the impact that has, the support from Halton as a board and from Aiman and Rachel's leadership on the school's ability to focus on sustainability throughout systems, teaching, learning. It works both ways. Of course, as they said, it was student driven, and many of these issues came from the students themselves, but it's reinforcing and it's supportive to have a board level funding, investment, time, energy, resources are all the things that make this happen. And so we're so grateful to work with a board, that has such a focus on these issues and can see the support that does exist, and the resources that we provide to teachers, the professional development that we have to offer, and the difference that that makes in teachers feeling confident and comfortable integrating these subjects into their classrooms. And then students feeling empowered to bring these issues up and drive their own learning and, find ways that they can make a difference in their community, and seeing it all come together at these events when we work together. What Rachel was referring to as a youth forum is so special, and it's inspiring and motivates us to continue doing the work for sure.
Jen, I'll direct this question at you, but if other folks want to jump into, that'd be great. When students encounter this work through really meaningful projects and experiences, do you notice anything about how they see themselves and their role in the future? Everyone here has mentioned climate anxiety, which I was at a talk maybe even a couple of years ago at this point with the CEO of the Kids Help Phone. And the number 3 reason out of all the reasons kids across the country call in for, with mental health issues and anxiety, climate anxiety is number 3, which surprised me. So I think you all identified that. Do you notice anything change in the type of work that you're providing and doing with students?
Yeah, I'll quickly speak to from my perspective, but I'm sure Rachel and Aiman both have incredible stories about this. It's concerning, right? It's really worrisome that obviously this is an issue now that we can't ignore. It's happening. We're past the point of necessarily solving, but we can mitigate impacts at this point and make a difference in adapting to the changes that are happening in a positive way. And so I think what's contributing to the climate anxiety too is just the tangible effect. So, now more than ever, students across Canada, but I'll speak to here in Ontario, are experiencing the effects of climate change firsthand, whereas a few years ago it might have been just seeing it in the news or it felt more abstract. But with heat waves and smoke and, growing wildfires and flooding, there's so many impacts that students are feeling firsthand. So it's really impossible to ignore. So when we take that and we look at the issues that are happening and, create opportunities, or students finding the opportunities themselves, seeing an issue, finding something that they personally are passionate about. So an issue that matters to them, working with supportive partners and adults who can work together to create change on an issue. I think just really gives students agency in the problem. So, and that isn't isolated to students themselves. I think for us as adults too, you can see when you're working on issues that are important to you or matter to you, and you have the ability to not just worry about it, but to feel like you can make a difference. It offers a sense of hope, and okay, what I'm doing can make a difference, and what I'm doing can have a positive impact. And I think the other piece of that is in getting involved in that work, you can see how many people are working to make positive changes. So, finding students that are also worried, but also passionate, and finding adults to see that we're in this together. We're not, in many ways, we're leaving a problem for future generations, but there are so many adults and people working on these issues that want to work together to change it. So just creating that sense of community, creating that sense of agency has a huge impact on being able to find hope in what is otherwise a very scary issue.
I think from our perspective, I would say very much aligned with what Jen just shared around the building of community. And this is what we've seen great success in. Part of the work that Rachel and I have been doing is really finding a way to build community, not only community within their classroom, community within their school, connecting them to community organizations, but now a larger HDSB community. We've got almost 67,000 learners in full-time learners, that is, and we have about 15,000 part-time learners, or adult learners in our system. So it's quite a significant environment for impact. And one of the things that I can tell you is that the most significant shift is identity of the student. If a student no longer sees themselves as just learners preparing for the future, and I think this is where people start to experience that anxiety, but you start to see yourself as an individual who can influence. And so when we get people together and we support them, and they're doing projects, they're doing hands-on projects that are making a difference, and we're elevating this work. So we've had an example. We had a student in one of my high schools, school called Dr. Frank Hayden Secondary School. Well, this young man, Evan, he got inspired by all the work around environmental and global citizenship. Well, he invented some sort of innovative science project, which ended up winning him not only provincial, national, but a global award. International. He's being asked to speak at all sorts of different places all over. He's been featured on numerous channels and various other places. But not only him, but there have been so many others that have won competitions because they've been inspired to think about, hey, I can make a difference in the environment. So we're seeing projects where students are now seeing this agency of change. It's like, I can make a difference. And we brought them together last June to say, okay, you've been doing a lot of learning. You know, we gave you funds to do projects at your schools. Come show us. And so we got them together in a symposium where we got schools to all come and present on their projects. Well, if you see the innovation and the excitement and the ability for people to feel that they're actually making a difference, and then seeing what other people are doing as well. I mean, that's what Jen was talking about, that collective impact really takes away from the idea of anxiety and climate anxiety, because I'm no longer a person that's waiting for things to happen. I'm making things happen. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from a lot of this work, is when we create the conditions for students to take risks, to try things, and for the educators to no longer feel that they're isolated in their passions, they're isolated in their advocacy. They have agency, they have the ability to make a difference, they have places that they can call for support, they have people that they can engage with, and multiple entry points. So it's no longer, I am going to do something in science class. I am going to do something in geography class. These are across curricular. All teachers can engage in this work because they find ways to make those connections. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other things that we're doing to impact leadership in our system. You know, we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the other questions that you have, Jason. But I'm so incredibly excited about the coming month, and we'll be able to share with you a little bit about what we're planning for our system leaders, because we've been doing a lot of work with teachers and students, and in order to impact not only the students and the educators, but the most influential people in education, as much as we'd like to think that would be the senior leaders in our systems, but it is the school principals.
Absolutely.
They are the most impactful people in our systems everywhere. And so we're working very closely with them right now.
Well, let's jump in there, Aiman, because you described, or I've seen you describe, the Environmental Leadership Learning Center as not just a building, but as a kind of overall signal of what the system values. Can you describe the setting up of that center and what role spaces like that play in shifting the culture across the entire district?
Well, part of the excitement around this center was really, we wanted to figure a place where can we bring community partners and leaders, change makers, to come together and feel inspired. So we have very limited budgets, as you could imagine, in our place. And I wish that we could, set up a whole building for doing such a center, but the Environmental Leadership and Learning Center, very strategically named, very strategically planned. And so we got a vacant space in one of our schools with very little. We were able to transform the space into an inspiring space of really inspired by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, finding ways to highlight them, showcase them, thinking about what drives us, our multi-year strategic plan, thinking about who our partners are and making sure we highlighted them. And our Indigenous partners, we brought them in at the very beginning to help us set up a plan and say, what would be important to do at this center? How do we partner with our Indigenous partners and make sure their voices are in our center? And so looking at the center as a space for not only classrooms to come and visit, but this is where leaders come. And it's a signal that decision makers can make a difference. So when we bring in students at a very early age into a place where they can feel inspired, where people can come in and use it as a think tank, where they can be inspired by a quote on the wall or inspired by one of the SDGs that are hanging beside them, while they're thinking, while they're creating, while they're innovating, thinking about the future, artificial intelligence. How do we solve the problems of the future? Technology and innovation got us into a lot of these messes. But we are big believers that if we make the right decisions, those same technologies and innovations can also help us with solutions far greater than we could just come up with our own. And so this center has been a space really that creates that inspiration, but also signals to the entire system that we value leadership. We know that leaders can make change. And if we truly understand what leadership is, it is not about positionality. It is about people that have the ability to influence others. So whether people have a formal title or they are a leader in a club, or they are an influential person in their school. And that influence comes from a passion, a deep passion to want to make a difference. And so that's what that center signals to the entire system, is that we value leaders, we value change makers, we value innovators, inventors. This is a space where we want to bring people together that are like-minded, that can come together and come up with those solutions and ideas, whether it's system leaders, principals, students, teachers, and we're connecting that center to also all of our partners that can help us, because we don't have all the resources, but our partners, because of their commitment to this work, have resources. Like, for example, we worked recently right beside the center. The center is located in a school. We worked with a partner, and the partner is the city of Burlington. And so the city of Burlington, we want to plant trees in the community. Well, they want to plant trees. We want to plant trees. How do we get that inspiration going? Well, lo and behold, instead of taking a month to plant one tree in a school, we got the city to work with us, and the students, almost the entire school was outside planting trees. 250 trees were planted that day.
Amazing.
That level of impact, that level of collaboration, that level of engagement started to have a ripple on the whole school itself. The school, because of the center, because of the learning, well, the students have been so inspired at that school that they decided they want to do certification for eco schools. And eco schools is another great partner of ours that works across Canada. And so the students they never even had an eco club at the school. They went from no eco club to wanting to do a platinum certification. Usually that takes schools, 3 years or so to get into that mindset. And they wanted to go right for the platinum certification because of all this inspiration. That's the kind of impact that these things can have, and I believe leaders can have on this work.
You mentioned there are several partners, but you also discuss your collaboration with the Indigenous rights and education partners. How have they helped you shape perspectives on relationship to environmental leadership in schools?
Well, part of our team, we have one of our commitments, of course, is Indigenous rights and education. We have a full team in our school board. That team is also connected to the Mississaugas of the Credit, which is the that organization, and these are the people, these are the landowners, the treaty landowners in our community, and so we have a deep connection with them. And so part of their work is how do we get the entire community to start recognizing that we have a duty and responsibility to care for the planet. We have a duty and responsibility to see ourselves reflected, focusing on the water, focusing on the air, focusing on the land, thinking about those types of responsibilities that we have. These are rights of humanity to have those. And we've had for so many years, organizations and corporations that have just benefited so greatly and reaped, but they did not think about the future, about the consequences. We're all seeing those consequences from 50 and 80 years ago and 100 years ago of all the innovations that have happened without any thought to sustainability. And our Indigenous partners for generations have been finding ways and really advocating for ways for people to work with them and partner. Let us work with you. Let us partner. Let us guide some of the thinking that you have when you plan what you're planning. And so part of that partnership has been, here's what we would like to do. Here's what we're thinking. What are your thoughts about this? How do we ensure that we're doing this work properly? Like, for example, I'll let Rachel talk a little bit more about this, but we have an incredibly exciting initiative that we're doing in the Environmental Leadership Learning Center. And so I'll just speak a little bit about it, but, thinking about salmon. And one would think, wow, this is a really exciting project. We're going to take salmon eggs, we're going to get them to hatch with us, and we're going to put them back into waters. That would seem like such a, beautiful little project. That project itself sounds like it would be so much fun to do, but we decided to consult with our Indigenous partners around this project. Well, one would then learn that this has significant implications, but also a significant ties to the Indigenous community and salmon, and the whole idea of bringing salmon back because they become extinct in so many different, and how the salmon impacts the environment. Maybe Rachel could talk a little bit more about how that partnership came about and what we're doing with that, and how incredibly impactful it was on our relationship with our Indigenous partners, and how they've been able to come and partner with us on something that would seem so simple, but it turns into a significant learning for our students, the significant impact on our connections with the land, with our Indigenous partners. So maybe Rachel could talk a little bit more how that partnership came about, because it's incredibly exciting to partner with our partners, our Indigenous partners.
Yeah, and I think it's another really nice example of how, we have the vision of the Environmental Leadership Learning Center, and sometimes you never know how it's all going to turn out. You just kind of have to start and see where it goes. So a little bit of background is we also, a few years ago, I developed a program called Nature's Near, and the NEAR stands for Neighborhood Eco Action Rangers. And it's actually a co-op program. So high school co-op students can apply, and it's their job for the semester. So they often get 2 credits. So they spend a half day participating in Nature's Near. And the whole idea is these high school students develop an outdoor education program that they then go into schools, elementary schools, and deliver it to grades 4 to 6 students. So we're developing environmental leadership through that, building capacity for teachers. And also it's that idea of you don't have to go far. You don't have to go to a big park or drive somewhere to be in true wilderness in nature. It's all around us. So I think that was like a really big part of it too. And the center just really grounds that. The center, also the location, was part of the reason we picked that school. It backs onto Brownie Creek. So we also have partnerships with Brownie Creek Provincial Park. And then it actually was with that tree planting. So City of Burlington came by and they work closely with Ontario, I might get this wrong. I always mix it up. Ontario Federation of Fishers and Anglers, so OFA. And a big part of OFA, they have this Bring Back the Salmon program. But in that, we can't just raise salmon and put them back in these streams that aren't healthy, these streams that they've been extricated from, that they're not healthy in, right? We have to also work on the health of the water and the ecosystems, and it's that systems thinking, right? So now we're starting to understand the relations, and that's a huge part of where the Indigenous partnership really comes in as well. So OFA, as part of their conservation, does tree planting because trees are very important for river health as well, right? It provides that shade. We need cool water for the salmon eggs. There's all these pieces to it. So we started this tree planting with OFA. Our colleague who runs the Nature's Near program built this beautiful relationship with them through tree planting. They learned about what we were doing with the school board, and they're based in Durham, so it's actually, and they drive from Peterborough. So Halton isn't the easiest place for them to bring salmon tanks and bring this project. They don't have a huge capacity, but through our center and kind of what we were doing, they were like, oh, we might be able to build capacity here and support more schools. So of course, through that, immediately we were like, let's bring in our Indigenous Rights and Education team and have this conversation together. So we got a salmon tank in our room, brought the whole team in, and it was almost like a knowledge building circle as well, coming together to just, you know, OFA's coming in, they're like, hey, as much as we have the fish, like we're not an expert either. Like we're figuring this out together. What does this look like in our community? You know, this little fish can swim into kids' hearts, right? And be that passion project that we're talking about, or that spark. But again, how are we doing it right and in reconciliation and in true relationship and understanding that system thinking and that knowledge? So it's one of those things where it's just going to take time. So as much as it's like, yeah, we want to get everyone involved, it's also kind of taking that step back to say, like, let's get on the same page and in alignment, and let's understand this more. Let's really see what this can look like and build from there. So it's just a really nice starting ground and a relationship that kind of, I think, was very serendipitous of how it all came together. And it's just been a really nice way for us all to connect, I think. And yeah, it put as simply as I can put it, but I think there's just so many layers to it. And just that example of, you know, education is not perfect. It's not rigid. It's not this, you know, it's going to be messy and, you know, really collaborative. And I think it's just a really cool example of where that learning and thinking is going.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think those things feel serendipitous, but the point is that you're looking for the connections, right? And then when you find them, it feels that way. But obviously you and the team there are taking efforts to build that community and build those networks where they're absolutely needed. So that's a wonderful story, a wonderful example of how you can move beyond the classroom and to have real, you know, on the ground impact on the environment. So you've given us a lot of great examples of how you're all partnering together and actually doing this amazing work. Can I ask you, you know, Aiman brought up emergent technologies like AI. Can I ask you just to reflect on how you see these kind of new techs helping students move from just, you know, content reception and learning about the problems to actually solving them? And maybe I'll start with Jen. I'll kick it over to you to tell us how you're thinking about it at LSF and how you're working with districts to think about what could be problematic, which are actually problematic technologies like AI, but how we can use them to serve us instead of the other way around.
Yeah, it's such a complicated question and so timely. But I think there are obviously some clear opportunities for utilizing these skills utilizing these tools responsibly. And, you know, specifically when you're talking about actively working on solutions, I think opportunities exist in terms of real-time data monitoring when it comes to climate patterns, biodiversity, issues. Also, looking at what's happening globally and connecting to information more readily of real-time data and information. In terms of the considerations, not only is there the resource use that we want to consider with every search into AI, but also just the misinformation and disinformation is a huge critical piece that we are grappling with how to address. And so I think when it, comes to using these tools at this point, and I know you've had some really interesting conversations on this podcast specifically about this, but looking at how students can be equipped to use them responsibly when it comes to critical thinking, using them as a support tool to find information and think about that information critically, have ways to look for what is mis or disinformation in the information that they're seeing and cross-reference with data. So yeah, those are some opportunities that exist, but also some considerations. But Aiman and Rachel, I'm sure there's other.
Yeah, Aiman, Rachel, from like the district perspective, how are you folks thinking about AI? How are you connecting it to the work that you're doing around sustainability?
Well, this is something that we're deeply passionate about it, and Jan and Rachel will tell you that I say 2 years ago or maybe 3 years ago, one of our very first conferences when we brought LSF together was we want to focus on AI and the future. That was our very first conference, I think, that we did. And I remember connecting and saying that not only do we want to focus on the jobs of the future, we want to expose students, but also the ethical responsibilities around, the impact of AI on the environment, but also how can we now be at the forefront of critical thinking and exposing and seeing, rather than just be consumers and users of this technology. How can students use this as a thinking partner to solve problems? And how do we inspire students to go back to their schools and choose projects and thinking and ideas that starts to prompt them in that area of creativity, curiosity? And so this is one of the exciting things that we're seeing, is that a lot of the projects that students are doing are in fact infused with this type of innovation. And I believe it was a part of it is a lot of our beautiful environments that we've created, incredible educators that have inspired students. But I believe that leadership has a big role to play, which is setting forward the motion, setting forward the permission for people to learn. And let me give you a little bit of an example. When AI started, I would say really making headway and a bit of an impact, most school districts across North America, because we were in touch with many of them at the very beginning, is, well, what are we going to do with this technology? My goodness, everyone was focused on the technology as a leverage or an opportunity for students to be using it in not so many good ways, like plagiarism and cheating and various other things. And so most people were focused on how to block this technology out of their school districts so that students wouldn't have access. And so thankfully, I had some great colleagues that work with me in the senior team. When I approached them and I said, can we not lock it out? I know there's risks involved, but we need to balance that risk and the privacy, because those are the biggest pieces of giving access to people. And so we allowed the experimentation of AI, and where people naturally gravitated to using the technologies, experimenting with it. And educators started finding ways to use it, because the educators, when they saw benefit to themselves, benefit to students, then we put together a robust strategy. Our superintendent of information services, our IT leaders, all came together with our school programs department and various other system level leaders, where we started to say, we need to put a strict strategy together here to move this work forward and expose students to the ideas and the opportunities. And so when it comes to environmental and global citizenship, part of our commitment for the school board was environmental and global citizenship. Believe it or not, technology innovation is one of our core commitments in the environmental and global citizenship area. So the second commitment, so that we have objectives within the commitment. So environmental and global citizenship is our, big commitment. And then what are our objectives? What are the objectives of that commitment? Like, how do schools know what they should be doing and what they should embrace? And so one of the commitments is really focusing on innovation, creativity, curiosity, getting people to think and create. Second one is using technology mindfully. And so that is part of our work. This is part of our core work to drive this right across the district, where we have AI, using it mindfully to drive and ensure that people think about sustainability, but also innovation. And the third commitment in that multi-year strategic plan is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, incorporating this into all of our work and learning environments. Those are our core objectives of the multi-year strategic plan area of commitment, which is environmental and global citizenship. And so seeing this work, for example, students came back, and when we talk about that showcase where students came back, the number of AI projects that came and technology projects, like I'll give you an example. These 3 girls designed an app where it's like a ride sharing app. So they wanted to show people the impact of carbon emissions if you decided that you wanted to create a bit of a ride sharing. And so it would actually show you where you live, and depending on, who's driving and who's going to be carpooling, and it will give you the impact of that on the environment. Immediate results, where students invented this technology. They invented that app. And so they were experimenting with all sorts of innovative technologies like this. Others invented, the student was working on a drone which would identify forest fires by patterns of different environmental pieces. And so there are many, many projects that we could share with you, the innovation that came about through all of this. And it really starts driving a lot of this. And so I would say to you that it's been an openness. And we have a very small team, Jason. So it's Rachel, myself, and a third person who's running the Nature Near program. This is the field trip that comes to you, which is the outdoor education. And so her name is Grish, and she's leading that work right now. They've impacted so far, it's not even the end of the school year yet, over 2,000 students that they've impacted by visiting the schools and doing this work and exposing them to outdoor learning. And so that level of commitment from 3 individuals, and we have also our superintendent of facility services, who has taken it upon himself, and it's also part of his responsibility around environmental sustainability to focus on the plant and the structures and how we do business in our schools and our buildings. So this team of really 4 people trying to leverage this work across the district. And so we could only do this through partnership. And we don't have large budgets. So our community partners have been the key for us to help drive this work. The resources that we've been able to bring in through partnership, through organizations to help us do this work and make this impact has been nothing short of extraordinary. And I think that is the key for us is partnership and being able to leverage all of that in order to drive change across our district.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as we kind of get to the end of our time, I want to be mindful of your time, and I certainly don't want to get in the way of like repopulating the salmon population across Southern Ontario here, because I know you're doing a lot of really important work. But But can I ask you to, if you were to, and we'll go around, each person can get a say here. If you were to give advice to ministry folks, to policymakers, to other education leaders about how they could implement or think about creating a more integrated way of thinking about sustainability in their school districts, in the provincial curricula, what are the key things that you would advise them to do? Like, again, just would it be a course on sustainability? Would you have a sustainability strand weave throughout the curriculum? What would be the key things that folks in senior leadership positions across the country, across the provinces should think about?
Very small question, Jason.
That's what this podcast does. Ask the big questions.
Go for it, Jen.
Sure, I can start off. So I think, obviously, really small question to end off with, but there are so many opportunities that exist here to become a leader when it comes to sustainability and to, amplify the amazing work that's already happening. But for teachers, for the teachers that are leaders to be able to do the work effectively, for principals that are leading their schools, and for boards that are taking a leadership role on this, I think we need to see more prioritization and funding from on these issues when it comes to having roles in school boards like Aiman and like Rachel, that are dedicated to leading this work and supporting teachers with funding, with opportunities, with professional development. I think there needs to be more focus on resources and professional development and making those offerings readily available to teachers to be able to implement. And this takes time, but we're already seeing it in many provinces, and expanding climate and sustainability education across all subject areas and grades. I don't think it's something that can be siloed into one subject. It needs to be integrated across all subjects, and to see the interconnectedness and the opportunities for action and for hands-on learning related to these subjects. I think as well, critical thinking, prioritizing critical thinking, and we're seeing some movement when it comes to support at a federal level and also provincially. There was a national environmental framework that was just released by the federal government that was, one of the first steps in addressing this at a national level and focusing on education, which is provincial jurisdiction. So I will pass it over to Rachel and Aiman maybe to speak at a board level what they would recommend.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what you said, Jen. It's really, at least what I've noticed of what's been successful. I started in this role not so long ago, a little over 2 years, and just seeing how much of a shift that's happened from a small team, and just knowing we've been able to do it with little budget. But the reason we've been able to do it is, I think, having it integrated in that multi-year strategic plan. So I think it really needs to be set at the higher levels of it being a commitment, because as Jen says, like, sustainability is an extra. And I think that's the biggest thing I've constantly been preaching to our teachers, to our principals, is it's not, I love eco clubs, and I'm actually a student of Halton. I grew up in Halton, and it's been really fun to come full circle, but I was the one kid in eco club at my high school. And so it gives me so much hope now when I walk into these schools and I see they have like 100 kids in their eco club. Like, they don't even know what to host eco club because there's so many kids. So there's so much desire and passion and kids wanting to be involved that I'm like, it shouldn't, not that I'm like, I love our eco clubs, but it shouldn't be a club. It should be everything. That everything we're doing in that school board needs to have that as a foundation, because look, we have every kid wanting to do it, and they're all, we've talked a lot about our passions, and there's all these different entry points to sustainability. So no matter what you're teaching, what you're doing, you need to have that mindset. So it's a mindset shift, and I think it really starts with, saying we care, we value this, putting it at those top levels to really influence our principals. I know Jen is working on a great principal course in collaboration with some amazing people. So developing professional development for principals, like how do you be this leaders? And, you know, Aiman always reminds me, what's the quote of, it's not how, it's who. Like, I find I sometimes feel like I need to do all these things myself, and I need to remind myself, you know, there's a whole community of us out here doing this work, and how do we activate and really, you know, so as a principal, how do you activate your staff? How do you encourage them to do these things? So yeah, it's really shifting that culture, and it's going to take time, but I think it starts with that support at the top level for sure, so that teachers feel seen and heard and recognized and acknowledged and celebrated. Because, you know, Aiman and I, we're trying to make environment cool. That's the main goal here. We want everyone to want to be in our club and do this work with us and want to work with us. So we're also trying to make it fun, you know, and bring that hope and that joy. I think those are really important too, to balance that anxiety and those emotions we all feel in this kind of doom and gloom time we live in.
Thanks for that, Rachel. Aiman, anything from the, you know, systems thinking, system leadership perspective? I think I mentioned this already, but just to highlight the point again, I've had district leaders like associate directors, associate superintendents in other provinces, when they hear some of the work, particularly that Nick's been involved in, they've asked us, like, we have this as part of our strategic plan, but we're not, it doesn't feel like it's moving. It doesn't feel like, they almost feel guilty for acknowledging that it's important, making it part of their strategic plan, but not seeing it kind of flow in the way that you and Rachel and your team have been able to do it. What kind of advice or direction would you give them?
Well, first of all, you know, what Rachel and Jen said earlier is absolute. You know, I would say to you that that's such great advice for anybody to hear. Some of the things that are going on with regards to how do we move this work forward. And as far as advice for other leaders, yeah, Rachel and I and some of our team members, we just recently presented to supervisory officers and directors and, you know, leaders across the entire province of Ontario at our annual conference. We just talked about, you know, how do we make an impact? How did we move this work forward? Let me give you an example. We have multiple partners. LSF is one of our most incredible partners because we do so much work with them. And the other partner that we do a lot of work with is the Eco schools across Canada. They have a metric and they have a measurement, and they you know, schools, if they want to be part of that team, they very much like LSF schools, they have a, you know, a tool where you can measure and then data is inputted. And so several years ago, we would have some, you know, schools interested through all of our advocacy, through all the work that we do. We'd have, you know, 25, 30 schools that sign up, 35 schools that sign up. And it would be pockets of excellence because it would be mainly a teacher that would be at that school that would be very excited. And so one of the ways that we decided to do our work was to say, we know that there are people in every school. How do we elevate their voices? How do we find them? How do we create a community for them? Once we found that community for them, we started engaging them, bringing them to conferences, bringing them to learning, bringing those staff members. And then we identified that there's lots of barriers for them. The barriers are, we would like to do some work in our schools, like create a garden. Well, what are all the barriers of creating a garden in a school? Well, there's budget, there's, well, you can't do it in this location, there's the facilities department, there's, you know, all sorts of issues. Who will take care of the garden in the summer where schools are out? And so when we started creating this network of people where they came together, they started to see what successes are out there. They started to see there's a network. We can call people. It's no longer about just calling Rachel and myself. We can call each other. So we built capacity in our system so that they can now collaborate together. So that's one way. Then we started identifying that, you know, there are, I mentioned earlier, The most impactful people in any school district on anything that happens are the school principals. And I will say, show me an effective school and I'll show you an effective principal. So the principals are key to driving any change in the schools. When they make a commitment to anything, it will happen in their school. Whatever they feel is important to them, they will drive and they will find ways to make it work. Whether it's, even if when they're lacking resources, they will find a way to partner with someone to bring them from outside. They will find a way to reach out to us. When they lack, initiatives outside, they'll find a way, if they're committed to that work, to make it happen. And so then what we've been doing is we not only worked with our students, not only worked with our teachers, but we started last year. We had our senior team give us a commitment to say, we gather the principals monthly together. Can you give us one full day of bringing the principals together? We want to do, in the month of April, we want to not only Earth Day, we want to make our district Earth Month. We want to have one day, full day conference for our principals where we bring all of our community partners together, all the organizations, our departments that in our system that are doing incredible things, our schools that are doing, we want to bring them all into one place. So we brought every single leader and we've put on a full day, including our Indigenous partners that came in and did this work with us right from the beginning, infused all the courses, infused the learning so that we can drive that change. And when principals walked away from that full day of learning, they walked back to their schools. So many of them felt inspired. So many of them felt empowered. So many of them had tools to go back and make a significant change because they connected to the purpose. Their purpose, a lot of educators, they care about children. They watched how much our students care about environmental work. They watched our students care about sustainability and the fears around climate, anxiety, and various other things. So then there is now a commitment to this work. They care. Our educators, I don't know of a teacher that gets into this work because they don't care about kids. They love kids. They love students. They want to make a difference in their lives. But there's always these competing priorities is what benefit would this be for students and how will this help them? I have, struggling readers at my school. I need to make that a commitment. And so some of our principals were able to identify that through this work, they were able to impact student wellness, student well-being. They were able to impact student achievement by engaging the learning, reading, writing, mathematics. They incorporated the SDGs. They incorporated environmental sustainability work, outdoor experiential education. They incorporated this where then it had a major impact on the students because they were doing real things that were important to them while learning, while writing, while doing the math, while doing the science, connecting all of this back to the work. So then our principals went back into their schools, and all of a sudden, we saw such an uptake in their commitment to LSF partnership, to Eco Schools partnership. Last year, we went from 35 schools that were Eco Schools to over 80. And this year, we're on track to have 100% of our schools that will be part of Eco Schools, and so many others that have now reached out to partner with LSF and taken on initiatives where they are incorporating this work right across. So that's the advice, is through partnership, through work with the principals, through work with the students and the teachers to create that level of excitement where people no longer feel that this is, like I wrote this in my article that I wrote out, Jason, and I think environmental work is almost seen like charity. Mm-hmm. This is not charity work. Any corporation, organization, government agency that starts to look at sustainability as a strategy, this is a strategy to make impact, but also it's good governance. It's good for the economics. It's good economics. It's good for learning. If you focus on sustainability, you think about, whether people are purchasing our procurement policy that was redone to reflect this work. Well, think about the money that you save by focusing on quality versus quantity, focusing on buying things that are sustainable, that are not going to be heading off into landfills. Think about the economic impact of that. This is not charity work. This is not a nice to do work. This is strategy. If you put this as part of your strategy and you make it a commitment, and our government our organizations, our government and our education ministries, they need to see this as a impactful way to drive change and stand up and say this is important, and put some dollars behind the work to say this is important, but also to support organizations like LSF that are partnering with us to make this happen. And so there's lots of funders and donors out there that I hope they continue to support this work, and we depend on them. We're not going to wait for anybody to make the changes. We're going to make them happen personally here at our level, and that's what we've been able to do. And I think that's what other school districts should look is leveraging your partners, your partners within your schools, your partners within your staff, your partners within your principals, but also the partners that are around you. You'll be amazed to see how many people have common goals. You approach the city councilors and you'll find that they also have a bunch of people that are passionate. You approach the local members of parliament and you'll find that they have also a deep commitment to this work. You approach the MPPs, members of provincial parliament, and they have initiatives. The mayor of each city that we work in, and they also have a commitment to the environment. Well, lo and behold, why don't we work together? Why don't we do amazing things together? And so we've seen this happen, and we've been the organization that gathers people together so they can get to know each other and get to know us. And that's our goals is to help make our students ethical leaders that will be change makers, that will be inventors, innovators, decision makers. And and believe me when I tell you, we have a whole group of students. When they graduate and they land in our corporations and businesses, you better believe they're going to bring accountability to every organization, because change is coming and we're seeing it, and it's very inspiring. And this is in the messaging right now is not a message of fear. This is a message of hope and inspiration. I can tell you that.
Well, from your voices to the ears of leaders and organizations across the country, I think what the three of you and your extended teams are doing is remarkable, and I couldn't be more thrilled to bring this example and this learning to folks across the podcast and across the world. So thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you for bringing us together, Jason. This has been really fun.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
This podcast is recorded on the territory and Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. The show is edited and produced by the marvelous and talented Andrew Mastroianni. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, remember, there's absolutely no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to contemplate what's happening. I'm your host, Jason Buccheri. Until next time.